Thanks everyone for attending today's live Q&A. The first question I've got here is from Vic, who's from Sydney. And he's asked, our legal updates get decent website traffic, but nobody subscribes to the mailing list. Any tips for converting these readers into actual subscribers? Okay, so let's focus on the first part of the question, which is you're publishing legal updates, you've got decent website traffic, and nobody's subscribing. So my first recommendation before we talk about how to get more subscribers is to look at your Google Analytics. So you want to make sure that your traffic isn't already coming from email, because that would imply that the readers are already subscribers. So we want to rule that out first. So to do that, what you're going to do is log into Google Analytics, which you obviously are aware of how to do that, because you can tell that you've got some data coming into the site. Then go to, there's a tab on the left-hand side, engagement, and then you're going to go to pages. What I want you to do there is then click on a specific post, and you might want to do this, say, for your last 5 or 10 posts. Then add a secondary dimension. So it's going to be called traffic source or session source. And what that's going to do is give you a breakdown of where your traffic's coming from for those posts. I'd recommend giving it a bit of a long time frame as well. So you might want to look at say 3 months of articles, if you can do that. For all the law firms that we work with, and we've got data from about over 50 firms, I find these numbers to be a bit of a handy benchmark. And so I kind of want you to compare your site to this benchmark. And that's that, say 70 to 75% of your traffic will come from search, so from Google. About 10 to 20%, if you're doing it, which in this case you obviously are, will come from email marketing. About 3 to 5% will come from referral traffic, which is essentially links from other websites. Another 3 to 5 will come from social media, if you're just sort of actively posting on social media. So it's quite low, probably lower than what people would expect. And then the remainder will be something called direct, which is where the tracking has been stripped out. So it might be, say, from your email signature, or from bookmarks. There's a whole bunch of things that it could be from. If you're doing paid Google ads or paid social media, there'll be obviously some percentages for that, and then other numbers will be diluted a bit. But hopefully that'll give you a bit of an idea of where you're at. So I want you to look at the traffic for your blog posts and make sure that the overwhelming majority aren't coming from email as a channel. Because if they are, it means that people aren't subscribing because they're already subscribed. The next part I want you to do is look at your content and just do a bit of a sense check. And a way of doing that is to ask yourself, does it make sense for someone to subscribe? So here's a bit of an exercise. Pick your last 5 articles, just like you did with the analytics, and ask yourself, is there one type of person who would find all of those articles useful? So for example, if you in your last post, you have, say, an article about workplace safety law updates, say for the construction industry, and then another article on how to contest a will, and another article on, say, the risks of not having a shareholders agreement, it's pretty unlikely that one person would be interested in all those things. And as such, they're unlikely to want to subscribe to all updates. So what you need to do is have some form of segmentation in your email database. And this needs to be visible publicly, so people know that when they subscribe in, they're subscribing to part of a database. So when someone subscribes, make it really easy that they can identify themselves and subscribe to just that relevant content. So if we take that example I had before, that first article about workplace safety law, you might have a list that people can opt into for HR professionals, or another list for, say, the construction industry. With the contesting a will example, I actually think it's pretty hard to find an obvious sort of client or referrer that would want regular updates on the topic. perhaps a competitor might, but it's probably unlikely that anyone else would. The shareholders agreement post, you might have a list for, say, business owners or, referrers such as an accountant's. So have a think about, these type of segments that you might want to set up on your subscribe form. In terms of encouraging people to subscribe, at the end of the article, I'd recommend writing a clear call to action that directs the reader to subscribe to similar updates, like the article that they've just read. So, for example, the workplace safety post that I mentioned, you might say something at the end of the article like, we publish regular workplace relations and safety updates and host events for HR professionals. To stay current on these topics, subscribe for updates and event invitations. So it's kind of like joining the dots for them. Another method for encouraging people to subscribe is a tool called a slide-in. So slide-in's kind of like a pop-up, but pop-ups are really intrusive and most people hate them. So a slide-in just sort of comes at the bottom of the page, perhaps once they've sort of scrolled down, maybe halfway down the page. Something sort of, it's quite subtle, but it does appear. It doesn't take over the whole page. You can find website plugins to accommodate something like that. But that can be a way of encouraging more subscribers. So the basis of your question, just to wrap this up, is about asking about how do you get that traffic from search engines and social media posts into subscribers. So some of the tips I've shared should help capture that traffic, but don't forget the easiest way to build your email marketing list is probably the most obvious, and that's to make sure your firm's clients, referrers, and broader network are on those lists. So we have a question here from Kay, and they've emailed in the question. And the question asks, I'm heading to the INTA conference in San Diego in May. I haven't done one of these big international conferences before, but I'm sure I'll have lots of meetings with potential referrer firms. Beyond business cards, what should I be bringing to these meetings? Great question. Thank you for the question. So let's start. I thought I'd start with a bit of context for the audience. So the INTA conference is for trademark attorneys and IP professionals. And by way of background, IP professionals, so lawyers, patent attorneys, trademark attorneys, they'll build what's called like reciprocal relationships with firms in other jurisdictions. And the idea is that businesses, so their clients, will often need to register a trademark or a patent in their local country, and they'll do that with a local firm. But as they expand geographically, they're going to want to protect their IP in other jurisdictions. So the local IP professional will then send that work to a partner firm overseas. They call these affiliates. And the idea with these relationships is that they send work like back and forth to each other. So with that context, let's go back to the question about what should you bring to the conference? And you asked about, well, you mentioned the business card. Should you bring, the business card? Definitely, they still have a place, especially at like big events like this. But what I'd recommend doing is create a custom card for the event with a photo on it of yourself. And it might feel a bit cringy, but you're about to meet a lot of people, and by adding a photo on your card, it's just going to help them remember who you are. If you're feeling a bit more adventurous and you've got a bit of time to set this up, and it's in May, we're recording this in Feb, so you should have time, add a QR code to the business card and create a Linktree account. So the QR code will link to that Linktree account. And what a Linktree account is, it's a one-page site. You can set it up yourself in about 20 minutes, and it's just going to have links to, say, your social media accounts. So your LinkedIn, if you're using X, you could even have like some links to, say, some recent thought leadership articles that you've produced. I'd also, if you're going to do that, include a Calendly link. So it's going to be really easy for people to make appointments with you. As to what else you might want to bring, a gift is kind of a personal choice. Like if it makes sense to do a gift, perhaps bring something like that. Depends, on your personality. I wanted to raise though some more kind of intangible things that you're going to like bring. So I thought a good way to describe this was to base it on my own experience. And I went to a business like / marketing kind of conference in Bangkok late last year. And what I did was, first step was I got the list. So most conferences now will have the attendee list in the conference apps. So they'll usually have an app for the conference and you'll be able to see all the attendees there. It used to be that the lists were kind of reserved for the sponsors, but these days it seems to be a lot more open. So you get the list. And what I did was, pardon me, I scheduled meetings before the event for times in like the lunch breaks and the dinner breaks and the coffee breaks at the conference. So rather than kind of like just who do I meet on the day, I'd already pre-set up at all those breaks to have coffee with someone, to have lunch with someone, to have dinner with someone. I was really intentional about who I met at those breaks. And from my experience, I got really amazing value out of doing that. And I'm actually now working with a couple of people from that conference. So to bring it back to your context, IP professionals, this game's all about reciprocity. So the conversation point is really easy to approach people, to have coffee with, lunch with, and so forth. I think about what do they really want to know? They kind of want to know what type of clients you work with. So what are you going to bring? Well, I think be prepared to talk about the type of local work you do and that you're likely to need international affiliates to handle. So in the background, you're going to research firms and people where you might have something to offer them and vice versa. I also wanted to like preempt a follow-up question, which is, should you bring a capability statement with your credentials to the conference? And my view on it is absolutely not. I think if you hand them a capability statement on the same day that you meet them, they're going to know it's like this boilerplate document, probably not going to read it. It's not going to be tailored to the conversation that you've just had with them. So give it a week before sending it to them. You can probably do a lot of the background work for the capability statement beforehand. Add in a cover letter based on the conversation you had. You might hide or add some experience where it makes sense to do so, but don't bring a capability statement to the meeting. So to wrap that up, what to bring? Business cards, absolutely. Consider the photo and link tree ideas. Maybe bring a gift. But what I really want you to bring is that planning. So you spend some time about being intentional about who you're going to meet with there and why you want to meet with them. For me, it's all in the preparation. We have now the final question. Marty has asked, our website analytics show people visiting our lawyer profiles, but not much else. Should we be structuring the site differently? Okay, great question, Marty. And this one's going to be a short answer. Your lawyer profile pages should be the most visited pages on your website. Given you're a general practice, it's likely that most, if not all, your work is coming from word of mouth referrals to your lawyers. If you think about how that kind of plays out, so the prospect gets your lawyer's name and then they Google it, they land on your lawyer's page, assuming you've got an individual page set up for each lawyer, and you've got some of the basic SEO principles in place. I've talked about this in another video. I'll link to that in the show notes. But really that flow is quite straightforward. Referral, land on your lawyer's profile page. Once they land on the page, they're going to do pretty much one of two things. They're going to send an email to the lawyer or make a phone call. Now, it's not impossible to track that kind of action, whether it's an email or a phone call in Google Analytics. And you can track things like people clicking the email link or the phone number link. but it won't track if people copy and paste the email link or dial the phone number, say, directly from their phone. Now, there's some more complex ways you can kind of track those kind of things, but I often find it's a bit overkill. The tools to do so can be pretty expensive, especially with phone calls. So I'd probably leave it. If you want to have people looking around your website more, I'd say the best way to do this is just to include links to relevant pages from the profile page. So that might be, say, to areas of expertise pages, or it might be articles that the lawyers have authored, or the events that they're hosting. But I'd add a caveat to it is you actually want them on the lawyer's page. You want them to call or email from that page. It's like the ultimate destination if your firm gets all of its work from referrals. So in short, I'd say make sure the lawyer's pages can be easily found. Make sure all the other pages on your site direct to those lawyer pages when it makes sense to do so. But I don't think you probably need to really restructure the page if you've got all those things in place.